Hola, moteros. Me llamo Chris Cope y esto es Indian Motorcycle Chief Vintage. Y ahora voy a decir a usted todo sobre esto. Can you guess the country that we're in, that Indian has brought us to ride this beautiful, beautiful motorcycle? And it is a beautiful motorcycle. This is the Chief Vintage. It's not a new motorcycle per se because you have the Chief platform that was overhauled back in 2021, and it's pretty much the same as that. The engine obviously has been around in to a certain extent since 2013. It's just a beautiful, beautiful and special motorcycle, but it's not quite as special as I initially thought because this is the first model for Indian under Carrollwood. Now, you may be aware that the Indian brand is about 125 years old, or exactly 125 years old. And to celebrate, to kick off celebrations this year, Indian Motorcycle on the 2nd of February, Groundhog's Day, make of that what you will, took on their 8th owner. No, stop. I got that wrong. According to this book, which was published by Indian Motorcycle in 2016, there are considerably more owners, right? So you have the original company that went bust in December 1952 and continued to sell motorcycles up until 1953. 1953, you have John Brockhouse, who had been on the board of Indian. He rebadged a bunch of Royal Enfields as Indians for the U.S. market. That didn't work. 1960, the name was bought by Associated Motorcycles, who were the makers of England's Matchless and AJS, and that tanked in 1962. 1963 to 1970, you have Floyd Clymer, who had been a motorcycle publisher and just really liked the name, and he mounted British Indians onto Italian frames. Now, there are questions as to whether Clymer actually had the rights to the Indian name, but according to this book, his effects were not contested. So then in 1970, Clymer died and his wife sold the rights to a lawyer named Alan Newman. And in 1976, Newman's company went broke, and then the name goes into an absolute free-for-all for a few decades, and it was used by a number of European and Asian manufacturers, including American Moped Associates, DMCA, and Indian Motorcycle Manufacturing Company Incorporated, which was based in Berlin and run by a guy named Philip Zangi, I don't know how to pronounce it, who was later convicted in the U.S. of 12 counts of securities fraud, 6 counts of money laundering, and 3 counts of tax evasion. In 1994, you have the Indian Motorcycle Manufacturing Incorporated, different than Zangi's company, and they were based in New Mexico. They developed a 1638cc V-twin prototype that was, according to the book, capable of running for several minutes at a time. but it didn't ever actually go into a bike, and it wasn't ever demonstrated to be usable. Not surprisingly, the company went bankrupt. In 1998, you have an organization called Eller Industries, which presented design drawings to the press, but then gave up before even developing a prototype. 1999, you have the Indian Motorcycle Company of America, and that's where we're starting to kind of get into familiar territory. These were the so-called Gilroy Indians because they were manufactured in Gilroy, California. They were actually sold. People actually rode them. You can actually find them. But that company went belly up in 2003. And then in 2004, you have a private equity company called Stelican that steps forward. That's kind of relevant because Carrollwood is a private equity company, and Stelican teamed with another private equity company, Novator, and started producing motorcycles in Kings Mountain. I'm reading. In Kings Mountain, North Carolina, that fell apart in 2011 when Indian bought Polaris. So you have the original company, Brockhouse, AMC, Climber, Newman, AMA, DMCA, Zangi, Indian Motorcycle Manufacturing Incorporated, Eller, Gilroy, Kings Mountain, Polaris, and now Carolwood. That makes Carolwood owner number 13 at least. And this is the first bike of the Carolwood era. And I thought maybe that was deliberate. Maybe that this bike, with its nods to heritage, it looks so authentically heritage. I thought that it was a statement piece, a declaration of what Indian is and where it's going. I was creating this beautiful narrative in my mind, and then last night I was talking with Indian and they were like, no, it was always the plan. Under Polaris, it was always the plan. This has been in the works for about 5 years. So it's not the great statement piece that I thought it was, but it's still a very good bike. And as I say, the first thing, the second thing, and the third thing that you notice about the bike is that it is beautiful. Indian, under Polaris and now under Carolwood, has always had a real attention to detail, but I think that this is kind of above and beyond. There's not really anything apart from the exhaust, which they can't do anything about. That's government regulations. There's nothing that stands out to me that I don't like. Everything seems beautiful and considered and well thought out. There's just so much to love. The engine is gorgeous. The way they've painted the engine so that it highlights its kind of natural feel, if that makes sense. Sometimes the way people are painting engines now, they look a little bit plastic. This looks real, it looks metal, it looks authentic. And I love the way that the frame looks like it's been wrapped around the engine. And the paint is just gorgeous and rich and deep. Everything about this bike is something that you want to stare at. You can stare at it up close, but the other thing that I hadn't quite realized until today is that it looks so good from a distance. So from 100 feet, you're going to be riding down the highway and there are going to be people going, whoa, what is that? Because it's just a gorgeous bike. Moving on to the heart of the bike, the engine. As I say, that's an engine that's been around since about 2013. It's the Thunderstroke 116. It's an 1890cc air-cooled V-twin. Because it's air-cooled, of course, horsepower isn't going to be that great. So you got about 115 pound-feet of torque. And Indian doesn't give horsepower figures, but based on that torque figure, you can kind of guess that it's round about 72, maybe as high as 80, depending on various things. So about as powerful as a Suzuki V-Strom 650. Not particularly impressive in that sense, but trust me, and I genuinely mean this, it's all you need. You're not going to have like sport bike overtakes, but in terms of riding and everything, you don't need any more horsepower, especially with all of that torque. It's just really lovely and really rich. And this is the thing that I was remembering today, because I've ridden a lot of Harleys more recently. And the power plant with Indian, the torque isn't as much punch you in the face. It's more completely wrap you and then propel you. It's smooth and it's rich, and it's difficult not to speak about it in kind of airy-fairy poetic terms, but it's just a really delightful experience. And the power delivery as well, nice and smooth. You have got a couple of different riding modes. I kept it in standard, and I found that was natural to me for a cruiser rider. And it's smooth and linear and just a really enjoyable experience, especially whenever you're pulling out of a corner or pulling off of a stop. It just goes. Moving on to the transmission. The transmission is kind of what you expect from a big V-twin transmission. It's a little bit sticky, it's a little bit clunky. No problems with it. But it's not Suzuki smooth or anything. But at the same time, I will say it's not tractor-like. A lot of times we compare cruisers to tractors, and it's better than a tractor, and certainly the clutch pull is a lot lighter. And to that end, about how that power delivery comes in the transmission and everything. These roads that we've been riding today, I will share something with you. I hate
riding these roads fast. I really like riding these roads, but whenever I've been here and I'm kind of part of a group and everybody's screaming along, I hate it. I absolutely hate it because there's these hairpin corners, and I'm just convinced I'm going to die. And and so as a result, I have a tendency to kind of overcorrect and go into corners way too slow, and I'm slowing everybody else, and I don't like the experience. And I started out kind of with the same mindset today. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be going into these corners. I'm going to be panicking, and I'm not going to like it. But there's something about the transmission that whenever I'm switching gears, it doesn't like lock up as much, and that's helpful. And we can get into this as well. Then the actual suspension, the way the bike handles as well, is really helpful. In fact, let's do that. Let's talk about the way this bike handles. Again, comparing it to a Harley, it's a lot more nimble. That's a weird thing to say about a motorcycle that weighs 327 kilograms, but it is a lot more nimble. It's almost flighty. That's a weird. I don't. That's there's probably a better way to say it, but it's very nimble, especially considering it's so long and so heavy. But you go into corners, and I had this situation a lot where I'm going into corners at my scared speed, and I'd come through and I go, oh, I could have done that a lot faster. I could have done that a lot smoother. And that happened again and again and again. And the the suspension, the chassis, uh, really made me feel a lot more comfortable than I was expecting to feel. And that's the engine and the chassis both working together. So it's more than just something to look at. It's really something to enjoy riding, and to enjoy kind of riding all day and just being out, say on a day like this, and loving life. I will say at higher speeds, obviously, the riding position, you're like this. And if you were trying to catch wind, you would probably go like that. And so at motorway speeds, highway speeds, you're going to catch a lot of wind. Probably don't want to sit at really high speeds for very long, but that's a cruiser, isn't it? So nothing really to complain about that. Speaking of which, the seat. Some people, I guess, looked at that seat and thought that it wasn't going to be comfortable. I've found it to be very comfortable. Um, usually it's a good sign of something if you have nothing to say about it. That's a good sign of it. And it's the same thing with that seat. It's comfortable, and I didn't notice myself being uncomfortable or in any way compromised. So it's a nice, wide, comfortable seat. Moving on to the electronics, one thing that's kind of cool to me is that Indian puts kind of a light version of its Ride Command software. And so you get maps, you get kind of a lot of info. You can connect your phone and listen to music and stuff, and kind of control all of that stuff through the switch gear. One of the things I really like about this is that the maps are built in, so you don't need your phone to be able to do maps. A lot of manufacturers these days have a system where you have an app and it works off of your phone, and that's supposed to work, but it never does. I've never had it work, and so it's really nice to have the maps built in. So there you go. Yeah, beautiful, great engine, good good suspension, cool electronics. This is a really lovely bike, and I'm not surprised by that. Indian does good bikes. If I'm going to complain about anything at all, apart from the fact that the exhaust is ugly, and that's not Indian's fault, the levers are not adjustable, which is for a motorcycle that costs, depending on the color that you get, black is a little bit cheaper than red. It's a little bit less than 19,000, a little bit more than 19,000. For that kind of money, you kind of want an adjustable lever, but I mean, I'm really picking hairs here. Picking hairs? I don't know what that's. I don't know if that's a phrase that anybody uses, but it is a good bike. The question is, should you buy it? I don't know. That's a really good question. I'll be honest. For me personally, this is a bike that's out of my price range. I'm never going to be able to afford to own one of these motorcycles. I wish that I were the kind of person who could afford to buy one of these motorcycles. I wish that I were someone who could consider that. And if I was considering that, I think one thing I might think about is the competition in terms of Harley-Davidson. Harley-Davidson doesn't have a bike that's kind of a direct competitor against this. But at least in terms of the stripped down attitude, it's a very different attitude, but in terms of the stripped down attitude, you have the Harley-Davidson Street Bob. The Street Bob has more power. Um, it costs about 5,000 pounds less, and it has a stronger dealer network. Now, I will say it doesn't ride as well. The engine's not as characterful. I mean, when you got an air-cooled engine, it's so characterful. I love having that heat come off. It's just great. But it's certainly something that I would think about if I was thinking about buying these bikes. But anyway, it's a fantastic bike overall, and if you are able to buy one, I'm very, very jealous. That's about it. Bye. I don't know how to